when all seems lost. Even when all seems lost. It's to order what is good and forbid what is evil at any cost. Allah replaces an evil nation with believers with a simple be and it is. April showers help adorn the earth with flowers. Then man thinks they have the power over stolen land. That kind of ego will only end your descendants with the barren of sand. Stereotypes and assumptions got nothing on truth. You can see that in the eyes of the youth. We won't negotiate with not any oppressor. Help comes from only Allah to neutralize any transgressor. Remembrance of our Creator is maximum resistance, whether it be the Uyghurs in China fasting in bathrooms of concentration camps, Palestinians worshiping at Al-Aqsa every Ramadan regardless of Israeli apartheid traps, the Afghan widows dreaming of a better future, never losing faith, just like the Syrian refugees in Europe whose du'as are never replaced or displaced. Even when brutalized daily by Hindu extremists, Indian Muslims protest an era of Jim Crow, or be it warring parties in Yemen that strike Muslim civilians who have no food for their children to grow. The brave Chechens who won't quit till they cut the strings of a sellout puppet president, the Muslim of Pakistan who took to the streets to call out how the West cheats by ousting their leaders to install pro-Americans in their seats. And what of our Black Muslim legacies? Fighting up against the statistical and systemic agencies. Our history doesn't start at transatlantic history, yet the bravery of my diasporic tribes is always worth mentioning. Let me cite the memory of the story of Bilal ibn Rabah al-Habashi, radullahu anha, who reverted while enslaved, who in face of inhumane, brutal persecution, for choosing Islam only replied, Ahad, Ahad, Allah is one. Then in freedom called all the believers to worship at night and at dawn. Or Omar ibn Said, a Muslim scholar who was enslaved in USA and pressured into Christianity. He wrote in Quranic literary devices, underground for Muslims and above for white audiences. What of Bilali Muhammad, a Muslim scholar who was also enslaved in the USA, the first to write an Islamic text in our history? And what of Makandal, the Black Messiah, an imam enslaved in Haiti, the spiritual and social cultural founder of the Haitian Revolution? His iman and courage was the key and the solution. Most notably, our late leader, Malcolm X, who taught us never to bow our necks to the very tyrants that forced the loathing of Blackness. He taught us self-respect, called Black men to protect Black women to the status of Virgin Mary and to take freedom by any means necessary. The Quran is irrigation to the human spirit's harvest. Oh, believers, don't let despair take you down to the farthest depth of the rocky bottom. Du'as up, Allah's got 'em. Bismillah, justice is soon to reign. The iman of the oppressed will always gain his favors. Ramadan is about rahmah and has so many flavors. We reject them idols, white supremacy and that white savior. Trauma may shake us, but we endure with sabr, no reckless behavior. Our struggle is one. Our ummah is one, regardless of tribes and ethnicities, son. The future belongs to the people who utter Qul hu Allahu ahad, who break fast at sundown and make wudu before it rises to. God won't change your conditions until you change what's in you. Hands up, let him Let us make the dua of Prophet Hud alayhi salam. So listen, hitters, I reject those you set as partners with God. So try me, all of you, and show me no respite. My faith is with and only with my Rabb. Anything else is a dub. If just a mere breath of his punishment touches you, you'd surely cry. You have no chance. This ain't an equal fight. Allah is the one with the power to disrupt the sky. I mean, because the shaitan can scheme, but Allah is the best of planners. So these panting dogs are on a leash, and they'll choke up at the final hour. So glad tidings to the steadfast. Taqwa and sunnah is our avatar state power. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Shawara. That was amazing. I am actually so glad we started with you. It was really centering, and I appreciate all the topics that you touched on. I'm sure it resonated with so many folks here. But yeah, round of applause. People use that clapping emoji. There's some emojis in the chat. Hype her up, because that was
Jazakallah khairan. Thank you.
What an honor to meet you.
Oh, it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Allah.
Well, that really centered us really about the topic. For those who are new to the Iftar for the people, this was actually born out of frustrations with the Muslim ban and the continued profiling and criminalization of the Muslim community since 9/11. And we wanted to take time within this holy month of Ramadan to come together, show that we're resilient, to acknowledge that many of us are doing the hard work. Many of you are doing the hard work to build safety for our communities. And we're still here. You're still here. And then we're continuing to persevere for those who are with us and for those who are no longer. May Allah have mercy on them. We also know it's equally important for us to have the space to share our learnings and build together and generate joy. And I know that's something that's really important to me, especially after COVID, making sure that we generate joy for one another in real life and online. We also know it's equally important for us to share these spaces, and I think this is a great opportunity for us to have you all get to know each other. And we also wanted to see, I see the Sikandar wanted to kind of perform before we do the activity. Can I have someone confirm if you want to switch that around real quick?
Sikandar, would that work for you?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, just a quick transition, everyone. Inshallah, we will be starting with Sikandar then, who will be sharing a little bit. And Sikandar, Catherine, would you like to introduce them?
With pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Sikandar Rahman is a South Asian musician from New York City who has been playing the violin since age 9. Sikandar has performed in various venues such as Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, and New York University. Most recently, Sikandar has taken up learning the rabab, a stringed instrument played in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Kashmir. Currently, he is taking rabab, instrumental, and Hindustani classical vocal lessons from renowned teachers in Pakistan. Sikandar works at a human rights organization in New York City, and we're going to turn it over to him now.
Thanks, Catherine. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. And I think with the spirit and the message behind today's iftar, talking about opening borders, I thought it would be great to perform a very famous Afghan folk song by the famous poet Omar Khayyam, and it's called Paymona Bede.
Thank you so much, Sikandar. That was beautiful and amazing. We really appreciate you sharing. Then thank you for taking the time to be here. I know you have to go off for iftar, but may Allah accept all your dua as well as iftaras, inshallah. And thank you for being with us today and sharing space with us.
Thank you.
Amazing. Now we're actually going to kind of go back to the activity we were going to do earlier. If it's all okay with you guys, we're going to go into a quick group discussion. We already have little breakout rooms set up for you all, and you'll be randomly assigned to groups. And we're actually going to be discussing the following question. You can see it on your slide. It states, what are our communities and organizations doing to make sure that people are moving freely? Again, the question is, what are our communities and organizations doing to make sure that people are moving freely? So with that, All right, I think folks are coming back in. Sorry if I cut you off in the middle of a really good sentence. I know my group was in the middle of sharing a really great reflection. So thank you so much. I hope that was helpful to you all to be able to meet other folks who are doing some great work and had really meaningful experiences to share. As we're like transitioning back and everyone's coming back to the main group, I do hope we get to continue to be engaged together. But we do have to move just because it's getting so close to Iftar time here on the East Coast. To move into that next section of the program. If we can go to the slide on introducing our panelists, that would be awesome. Amazing. Thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and turn to a conversation with our awesome panelists. I'll just give a quick intro to some of their names and where they're from, and you can see on the slide a little bit more about them. So from Empower and the NoMuslimBanEver campaign, we have Linda Sarsour, of course, and we have Kareem Golding from Freedom to Thrive, also amazing. Humaira Yusufi from PANA, Sabina Mohiuddin from AMAC, and Murad Awade from NYIC. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for being one of our panelists. You guys can wave if you want to see them on the camera so you can see who they are. Thank you so much. And you guys are welcome to unmute. I also want to mention one more time for our interpreter, after you share the answer to a question, leave like a 10-second pause before the next person answers so that there's smooth Arabic translation from person to person. Okay, with that, inshallah, we'll get started with the first question. So my question to you all, panelists, are, what are the barriers for immigrants and refugees to enter this country and thrive? Could it be documentation, IDs, etc.? I would love to hear someone explore that.
Well, I'll go first. Sabina Mohiuddin with the American Muslim Advisory Council, and I live in Nashville, Tennessee. And in Nashville, we've received over 500 Afghan refugees. And we all watched the news as people were fleeing. Couple last August, literally hanging off airplanes and thinking about what it required for them to leave. And, at that time they came in as parolees, but a lot of them left behind family. There are men here who had to leave behind their wife and kids. There are women here without their husbands. There are, young boys and girls who came with aunts and uncles. And so families have been separated. And how are they going to bring the rest of the family? I mean, our attention span is so short. People have forgotten the crisis there and what people are going through. And in order to come in now after that initial, 70,000 were able to leave Afghanistan, you have to show documentation that you're being persecuted. And it's really tough. And so now, and what we've heard is that a lot of times people's applications to come in as parolees are being rejected. And so families are separated yet again. We think about the Muslim ban, but it's still happening and people's attention spans are short and they're going to the next news. But they're still suffering.
I'll chime in here. I really appreciate you sharing that, Sabina, especially for the great work that AMAC does directly with refugees in the state of Tennessee. There are so many barriers to immigrants and refugees, and it starts with the processing for refugees to even enter the United States of America. There are refugees that are literally lingering in refugee camps, many for years at a time. There are Syrians who have been in refugee camps for 10 years and have not been able to travel here to the United States to seek refuge. And not only do we have what this country called some form of secondary screenings, but these delayed processes that I believe oftentimes are happening for certain refugees. And I think the important theme that we have today for this Iftar, this idea of open hearts and open borders, is that during the blessed month of Ramadan, not only are we reflecting and increasing in our worship, but we also have to be honest. It's about truth and sitting with this truth. And the truth of the matter is that when refugees are people who are of Arab descent or they are Muslim, we have a different conversation. You know, I am in unequivocal solidarity with the Ukrainian people, and I want to open our borders and welcome as many Ukrainians as we can, because they deserve safety and security, and their children deserve safety and security. But we want equity, and we want equity for all, you know, the Yemeni. I mean, if people understand the dire crisis that Yemen is in right now and the children of Yemen are in right now, we should be opening our doors to the Yemeni community, our Syrian sisters and brothers. And Syria has been a country that has been always welcoming to refugees. And there's been generations of Palestinians who have been refugees in Syria. And we need to open our doors to the Syrian people. And so I think our work here is to speak the truth, to advocate to our country that people who are in crisis deserve safety and security, regardless of their race, their ethnicity, where they come from, that this is a nation that was built on the labor of immigrants, some of them forced to this country and others who chose to come here. And I sit here with that during this blessed month of Ramadan.
I can go next, I think, though it's always hard to go after Linda, mashallah. My name is Humaira. I'm with PANA, Partnership for the Advancement of New Americans, and we are located in San Diego. And I think this topic of today really, really resonates as someone who's from a border city. Our communities and whether we are allowed to seek safety is really determined by the political whims of our politicians and by a racist immigration system. Only 1% of global refugees actually are able to be resettled and find safety in a new home. So I think that you know, the entire system is broken, and you know, we know that when there is political will, the global response to Ukraine shows us that when there's political will, there's a way, right? And we have so many communities that are suffering, that are in need of safety, that are not afforded that. And it's been really sad to see. I mean, a section, you know, a subset of Afghans were able to be evacuated and come into the United States. I'm from Afghanistan. We've been working on that in San Diego, but we are seeing how DHS and FBI are still coming and doing investigations in the homes of the very folks we evacuated, recognizing that many of these folks were, you know, helping the U.S. government, and now we're being questioned for their affiliations. We are seeing that even when folks are resettled in the United States, they are not thriving; they are barely surviving. That there is not the resources and the support systems put in place within our refugee resettlement program for folks to actually thrive currently. In San Diego, we have refugees who are practically homeless or who will be made homeless if there aren't programs to temporarily house them in hotels, because there is not housing is not part of the refugee resettlement package. And so refugees are struggling not only within their first initial 90 days, but months and years after resettlement. And so there's so much, I think there's so much we need to do in order to address these systems and make sure that we are rethinking the way that we welcome people, rethinking the way that we welcome people with dignity, and to ensure that they do thrive here, and that their generations, that their children are able to thrive when they come here. So I'll leave it there.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum. What I wanted to jump in with was, I was released after 15 years of incarceration, and the question focused on thriving in America. And it's very difficult to thrive in America without identification. And the system is set up so that you need an identification ID to get ID. Even in New York, where they have an IDNY, you still can't get one. So to thrive, you need identification. To get a job, you need work authorization, which is a system that's backlogged for 3 years or more for immigrant. To do anything in America, you need some kind of financial literacy. We don't have programs. ICE doesn't have a system. They will put you on an ankle monitor and have you on removal proceedings and ask for you to depend on organizations or welfare. We can't even get medical treatment if we don't have identification. You can't get Medicaid without an ID. So as a starting point, identification process is key. A supervision paper is not recognized by state officials from ICE. So some form of system of identification would be key to a step up in how we can begin to even thrive once we enter this country, if we're allowed.
Thank you so much. I think we'll switch off to the next question, if that's okay, just for the sake of time, but I appreciate those answers so much. The next question, and this question is, what are some of the opportunities to address these issues that you all mentioned? For example, like, are there any legislation in works or any other opportunities for folks to get involved or address these problems?
I can start and folks can jump in. Absolutely. I think that there's a number of different campaigns that are off in every state, right? Here in New York, I can't speak for other states, but I can say here in New York, we're currently working on the New York for All Act, which would prohibit the state from actually partnering with ICE, CBP, and DHS in any related matter to immigration enforcement. And that's a huge step. We did it. We passed a law in Westchester County, of all places, to do that already. New York City has a strong detainers law, but needs to be strengthened. And I think that once we get it done at the state level, it's going to make it significantly easier for our communities to actually thrive. On the latter part of what, the previous question and answering this question, I think that one piece here is that we actually need immigration reform. Our system that we currently have is incredibly outdated, incredibly based in racist policies, and really sways the immigration acceptance towards pretty much European countries. And I think that for the United States to not have updated its immigration policies in over 35 years, just making them worse in those 35 years, by the way, and not actually providing a pathway for citizenship for the now nearly 11 million folks who are undocumented in the US, is a real detriment to not only the country's ability to continue to thrive, because as we all know, demographics are shifting in the US, but the way it's seen as a global leader, and one that should be showing that we are welcoming people here. And what we're seeing at the southern border, and what we're seeing across the nation with the detention of Black and brown folks, and people thought it's going to get easier and better under Biden, and it's not. It's literally the same, if not at times, sometimes worse. So I think that we have a moral obligation, especially in the month of Ramadan, to really be thinking, how do we show up for our immigrant brothers and sisters? How do we show up for our neighbors? Because we're only as well as collective and only as healthy as our neighbor. And if you think about it, think about COVID. How well were you when your neighbor had COVID? You probably got COVID. And how healthy were you when your community was sick? You weren't, because everything was at a detriment. So I think that this comes back down to really thinking about our ummah and how we take care of ourselves and our community.
So let me jump back in with this new question and point out that immigration is a for-profit industry. A lot of the people that are controlling how immigrants country are major organizations, GEO, Core Civic, and so on. ISAP, which they have the incarceration system. We're supporting the Breaking the Shackles campaign with Freedom to Thrive, leading that fight. And as I mentioned before, I have an ankle monitor, and you should see the way that people look at my ankle monitor when I'm in public, right? Kids, so on and so forth. And that's a major discussion that needs to be had about how and why these organizations are allowed to profit off our struggles.
I can jump to the next question, if that's okay. How can we show up and show care and support for folks as they're experiencing limitations of movement?
I can start with this question. In many spaces that I'm in, and if you've been in space with me before or heard me speak anywhere, I always share this quote with folks. And it's a quote by Leela Watson, who was an Aboriginal activist. And she said, if you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come here because you believe your liberation is bound up with mine, let us work together. And I say to folks all the time, even if you yourself are a citizen and you are documented and you have the privileges of being able to move freely within the borders of our nation, that you're still not fully free if your neighbors are not free, if your children's classmates are not free, if workers in our community are not free. And there's a lot of things that we could do in solidarity. And I think solidarity is key for me as an organizer. You know, during the pandemic, I did something quite simple that I'm sure many other people did as well, but I was sharing it with someone. They were like, really, you did that? During the pandemic, when the pandemic first started in New York and everything was shut down, everyone was told to stay inside, stay indoors. There was limited, there was nowhere to go in New York City. We were lucky if the supermarkets were open. And I remember on my block, I lived at the time in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, and I lived on a street, and many of my neighbors were elders, and some of my neighbors were also immigrant families. And I went and got these index cards, and I went and put my name and my phone number, and I went around to my neighbors' houses, and I would knock on their door, and I would speak to them from behind the kind of glass, and I would put it in their mailbox, and I would basically say on the note card, I'm Linda Sarsour, I'm your neighbor, I live at this address, this is my phone number. If you ever need anything, please call. And I think we got away from this kind of interaction, this person-to-person interaction. We're always on the internet. We always see things in like a group kind of way. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but we see things from like just a different type of perspective. I'm an organizer, and I believe in the power of relationships. I believe in the power of getting to know one another. I always think back at the time of Japanese internment here in the United States of America, and that was a very horrific time. It was only around 80 years ago, which unfortunately is not that long ago. There are still people today who lived through Japanese internment, including former Congressman Mike Honda from the great state of California. He was a child when he was taken into the camps here with his parents. And I always think to myself, how is it possible that our Japanese neighbors 80 years ago were literally stripped from their homes? Like, officers came to their houses, dragged them, and took them into these camps on this US soil. And I believe part of it is that if we know one another, if we get to know one another, if you know your neighbor, if you know your coworkers, if you know and you are able to build those relationships, it's harder not to fight for someone that you know. And I think that in order for us to really show up for one another and really be able to fight for each other in the ways that we all deserve, we got to get to know one another. And I think in this digital age, we're constantly having these online conversations, but I always say to people, do you know your neighbors? Do you know who lives down the hall from you? If you work in a company, do you know who works in the cubicle, 3 cubicles down from you? And oftentimes people will say, Linda, I actually don't know their name. So I hope that at least what you take from here today, as we talk about protecting our immigrant neighbors, is to get to know one another, make sure your immigrant neighbors feel seen by you. A good morning, how are you doing? What's your name? Where you're from? Just getting to know people's story is very powerful.
Fantastic. Do any of the panelists have a quick conclusion statement before we move on into Q&A? We're like right on the dot on time for this section, but definitely welcome to do a statement if anyone wanted to speak.
For this, because I was incarcerated myself, like I say again, the limit to help people that are incarcerated, ICE has tactics that they use to limit us from reaching out to organizations, not taking down the phone numbers of organizations, and so on and so forth. But if there's a system where we can send USBs with translations of certain case law to help people coming into this country, because a lot of times we don't have legal representation while we're in confinement. People that are just families that are being separated sometimes have to fight for themselves. So a USB with information on it and organizations, if they can get into the facility, would be a great help.
Yeah, and just really quickly, I think that just to close this out, I do think that we've seen the worst of the worst with immigrants being targeted over the past 6 years within the United States. I do want to uplift our Black immigrant brothers and sisters who actually are a very small population of the immigrant community, but are more detained and incarcerated and deported than any other group of immigrants in the United States. And I really do want us to all recommit ourselves during Ramadan, during the last 10 days of fasting, to make sure that we're fighting injustice wherever it rears its head, but also speaking out when it does, and making sure that we're taking action and not just being bystanders in the moment. And I look forward to working with everyone to make sure that we have a just society that we can all thrive in.
Can I add to that? Oh, go ahead.
You go ahead.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I just also wanted to add, find it, if you don't already have it, find your political home, find an organization that is doing advocacy around these issues. They matter, especially like Brother Murad said, to, supporting our Black immigrant communities, folks who are detained. Black immigrants are detained much longer than other folks. They, organizations like PANA support in advocacy to make sure that they get representation and that they get the support that they need. There's also a lot of other things that could be said around this issue and how folks can get involved. I've been volunteering at a shelter for unaccompanied children on my free time, as well as the work that I do, because I realize that there are a lot of children who need support, who need advocacy. You can become a child advocate for these children. Right now in the shelters, there are hundreds of Afghans who are there as well, but even for the ones who are not, there is a lot of support that children need as well, in making sure that they're not forgotten when they don't have their parents and they're waiting days, weeks, or months to be reunited with family.
And I just wanted to add, that advocacy work, a lot of times we think of big initiatives on like the federal or state level, but it's really, advocating for better resources on the local level for these communities. And that means you've got to work with these organizations that provide resources and advocate, hold them accountable, and say, really, we all want our immigrant refugee communities to thrive. What will it take to get them to thrive? And it's resources, being well resources. So that's advocacy work that you can do kind of on the local level.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate all of you amazing panelists. I do encourage all of you to follow them. You can see their names on the slide right here on whatever social media that you're on, and see what kind of work they're doing and see how you can be involved. And I really appreciate all of you panelists bringing this topic to light and centering this discussion for us in Ramadan, especially because as we're entering the last 10 nights, this is the best time for us to increase in our worship and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for ease and also for guidance and being able to do more for our communities in real life. So thank you again. That kind of concludes our panel discussion. I will now switch over to Catherine from Freedom to Thrive, who will initiate our Q&A.
Thank you, Cynthia. And thanks again to our panelists for this wonderful conversation. So this is your opportunity to folks who are in the audience. If you have particular questions that you'd like to ask our panelists, we'll take a few. You can drop them in the chat. I know we're also there in the chat. There's also a few calls to action, and we're going to have some more. We're going to share that. Any questions? have not seen any questions. People may still be typing. Want to just recognize some of the things that folks have shared, personal experiences, also folks who are really energized and inspired by what has been the panelists and what has been shared. Okay, yes. Dr. Naya Habib with a question. You can unmute. Dr. Habib, can you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Just a suggestion, seeing this rampant discrimination and hate, just a few words on that. There is a need for a sort of education to people at all levels, but whether this can be done or not is a question, and whether an organization can start on this. I'll just give you one example. There was in Time magazine front cover picture of Taliban with a rifle saying, "Should the world be afraid of?" So to the letter I wrote, if the world accepts the principles of Islam without accepting Islam for their religion, it will be a better place to live. And they published that. On that motto, what my suggestion is, we know that there are two kinds of people in each community, in each religion and race. One who is looking for things that you people are doing to improve the situation. The others are resentful and they're doing all kind of discrimination and hate crimes. My suggestion will be that if it is possible to extract all things from all religion without giving credit to a specific religion, and after extracting those information, compiling them and start an educational ways and means to educate the community, the society, the family, so that they can live better. Now, one example from Islam is, it says that be just, pass justice, even if it is against your own brother, sister, or parents. I'm not saying that we give credit to Islam, but these kinds of things are in all religion. And whether we can have an educational system to educate at all levels, from the family up to the parliament.
Thank you
This
for
is my
that.
suggestion. And in Regina, I provided community leadership for 28 years. And just I'll take you 30 seconds of time. And when we migrated to Canada, I perceived that there were three groups of Muslims. One who amalgamated themselves to the Western society, other group who hated each and everything of the Western society, and we felt, along with our community members, that this is not the way. The way was to integrate with society at large without losing your own culture and religion. And this came up at the time when Saddam Hussein had declared jihad. And so it was a very successful, and that is the way we acted in Regina, Saskatchewan. I compiled a book, and that was History of Muslims of Regina, a cultural integration of over 600 pages. So
Thank you
here,
so much.
in
Thank you,
summary, I'm saying, yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry, Dr. Habib. We thank you so much for your
Thank you.
observations and for your contribution. And some people, maybe you can drop the title in the chat if people want to get the book. We have a few other questions in the chat. One question was about how can people get involved when they don't live near an urban area? So I don't know if any of our panelists want to answer that.
So I'm also the co-chair of the Fair Immigration Reform Movement, which is also known as FIRM. So folks can check out FIRM Action. I can put the website in the chat so that folks who, and we're in a number of different states across the country, and there is organizations like the New York Immigration Coalition in almost every state. So happy to share that information so that y'all can join. But also, even if you're in a rural area, you can also join Empower Change. That is a national organization and the facilitator and co-host of this event.
I'll also add something, Catherine. I think, and I always appreciate having spaces that are digital because it allows us to be with folks who are organizing in rural spaces. They may not be in Los Angeles or in Detroit or New York City. And I saw a question, the person who asked that question was kind of referring to that. You know, that's the beauty of the internet, that we're able to stand up for, sign petitions, send emails, you know, kind of give our voices to communities, even if we're not necessarily in a place where there's actually physical organizing that's happening, that the world is so vast and there's so much that we can do. And so one call to action that I have for folks, that they're going to drop it in the chat, is that, or maybe I know how to drop it in the chat, I think I know how, is that many people know that President Biden, literally his first executive order was to repeal the executive order on the Muslim ban. And everybody was really excited about that. And it was, of course, showed, to me, it was a testament to the powerful work of our movement, our intersectional power building that we've done. And especially during the presidential campaign, that force someone like Biden to say, this is going to be my first executive order. But unfortunately, what people don't understand about executive orders, it's just that it's pen to paper and that we have to follow up to see actual implementation. And unfortunately, ever since the repeal of the Muslim ban and that executive order, we still have thousands of families who are still separated. There are people who had applied for diversity lotteries, which has been a very important way for African immigrants and North African immigrants and Middle Eastern folks and other folks from different parts of the world to come and immigrate to the United States. And those people who had approved applications for diversity lottery are still in limbo, still have not been able to get here, families still separated. So again, there was a pen to paper, it was symbolic, but unfortunately families are still separated. So next week, we're going to be doing a call to action. And so that link that I put in the chat, NoMuslimBanEver.com, Reunite Families, is a way for us to send a message to the Biden administration that we're still waiting. We're still going to follow up. We still want you to keep your promise that repealing the ban is not about signing a piece of paper. It's about reuniting families. So wherever you are in the country, from New York to California to Arkansas, you can be a part of this campaign. So again, please click on that link. And the reason why it will send you all the information that you need so you have everything handy. And that would be great for a great way for all of you to kind of join in the work that we're doing.
Thanks for that, Linda. And I see that, and Murad, for your comment, I see a lot of, there are a lot of websites and campaign sites in the chat, and we're going to compile all of them. There's also another question, we'll just take this last question that someone had in the chat, who is expressing concern for the Palestinians and all the money that we know is being sent over to Israel by the US government, and also support also by Canada. So this person is asking if there's any calls to action around that. What can we do?
I'll chime in quickly here, Catherine. So we have different campaigns as Empower Change when it comes to Palestine, particularly holding social media and corporations accountable. In our campaign, we have called No Tech for Apartheid. But in general, there are great groups that people should be kind of following, like Jewish Voice for Peace is doing incredible work as allies around policy advocacy around this issue. There are organizations like the US Campaign for Palestinian Rights, USCPR, Would love folks to follow them. Adala Project. So those are great organizations to follow. I mean, everybody already knows that all of us are aligned here. Even this question around refugees, Palestinians are one of the largest group of refugees internationally right now. And they have been refugees sometimes 2 or 3 times, unfortunately for all the circumstances. So we are in unequivocal solidarity with the Palestinian people, and hope that you all will join organizations whose mission it is to fight for their dignity and freedom to thrive for the Palestinian people.
Thanks for that. And thank you for these questions and for all of the information that's been shared. We also want to remember not only Muslim immigrants, but also American-born Muslims who are behind walls in detention centers and prisons, often which are the same very buildings. So those campaigns to provide support, to shut down these awful institutions, to improve conditions for the people who are stuck there, those are all part of, other ways that we can show sakat and support. I'm going to turn it back over to Cynthia.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I appreciate you facilitating. So I will do a quick performance introduction for the wonderful, the amazing Aya Aziz. Aya is an interdisciplinary artist and songwriter from New York. Her musical Eita, Questions for My Father, ran in New York Theater Workshops 2019 Next Door series. She's developing a new iteration of the musical with 59E59 Theaters and a new play as a current fellow with the Emerging Writers Group at the Public Theater. Aya is also a NYFA grant recipient and is currently working on her debut album, and you can find her single Rapids on all streaming platforms. So with that, Aya, you can take it away. And I would also quickly remind, if you're currently on the interpretation globe button and you're on Portuguese, to listen, you have to switch back to English just to hear this part. Thank you.
Wow, that was such a lovely introduction. Thank you so much, Cynthia. I will just start. This song is called When Love Looks Like Trying, and also we'll start again by saying I am so honored to be here and to bear witness to this wonderful conversation and to learn from the organizers on this panel. Thank you for organizing this wonderful event and gathering us into calls of action. This is what community looks like, and we need it. So thank you. With my head still resting on the kitchen table from the thoughts that brought me there. You'd think over the years, hearts hardened to their nightmares, but my heart won't. I'm haunted by videos of broken people doing wicked things I can't believe. It hurts to see. You'd think with all we're witnessing we'd share understanding, knowing right from wrong. In a raft on the sea, where families go missing and mothers grieve. Like a raft on the sea, a young man gives his life for the right to dream. When love looks like trying, we are the people we lose, we are the places we leave. When love looks like trying, we are the goodness we hold, we are the home we bring. When all we've got is trying, we find such a powerful thing. I know I can do better for the living. Like a raft on the sea, where families go missing and mothers grieve. Like a raft on the sea, a young man gives his life for the right to dream. When love looks like trying, we are the people we lose, we are the places we live. When love looks like trying, we are the goodness we hold, we are the home we bring. When all we got is trying, we find our joy in community. When love looks like trying, we keep on, 'cause we got to do something. When love looks like trying, 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 we keep on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Thank you, Aya. Um, wow, we should show some appreciation in the chat for sure. It was absolutely incredible. We are now going to hear from our next performers, Tazzin and Lufuki, who are great favorites of ours at the Iftar for the People. They are a dynamic musical duo from Detroit. They believe that music is a sacred art form that can be used for storytelling, healing, solidarity, freedom, and social action. Guitarist, vocalist, and flautist Tazzin blends her soulful voice with Afro-Indo sounds, while guitarist and composer Lufuki weaves jazz, funk, rock, and classical sounds through his melodies and solos. Together, they formed a Detroit Afro-jazz collective called Divine Providence and have released 4 albums: Inner Horizons, Elephants and Mountains, First Light, and Love and Light. They also serve as co-directors for the Detroit chapter of GAMA, Gathering All Muslim Artists, and are the founders of the Sanctuary of Sound, an intimate community space that pairs meditation and music as a spiritual practice. Tazzin Lufuki, welcome.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum. We're going to play a piece for you entitled Garden, and it's the composition by Lufuki and the lyrics by myself, and it's really about this concept of home. What does home look like? What does home mean? How do we embody it in ourselves and in our communities? Faint and vague, opulent simplicity, lavender musk. Is this my heart? Is this my heart? A melody of love in the tune of ancient trees. A melody of love in the tune of ancient trees. I sing a melody of love in the tune of ancient trees. Oh, a melody of love. Forest greens and milky white beneath my feet. Yellow birds conversing in songs once foretold. Warm light on golden skin, fountains in deep within. Oh, turning to a place cold. A melody of love in the tune of ancient trees. A melody of love in the tune of ancient trees. I say a melody of love in the tune of ancient trees. Oh, a melody of love. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tazzin and Lufuki. We really appreciate it. And that was super cool. So lots of clapping hands emojis for you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I loved seeing that in the ASL interpretation. There was actual clapping hands, so that was fun. All right. So up next, we're getting really close to Iftar time for East Coast folks. So we'll try to be real quick here before I transition back to Catherine. But if you all could just drop some dua requests or prayer requests in the chat, I'll be reading those out loud. And I'll go ahead and start with just some beginning duas. Oh Allah, I ask for you to unite our community, make us amongst those who bring ease to our communities, help those who are in the most in need. Let us be amongst the people who bring kindness back to our communities and relieve hardship from our neighbors and from those who are suffering in our communities. I ask you all, I ask Allah to make dua, to accept our dua, to increase us in knowledge, increase us in worship, increase us in community unity, and being amongst those who make the greatest change for the years to come, and stay unified in doing good for others. And I make dua that Allah accepts good health for all of our families, wellness in our spirituality and our mental health, our physical health and well-being. If anyone else wants to drop some duas in the chat, I'll just read them out now. May Allah grant peace in Ukraine, borders, abolishing ICE, freeing Palestine, for the release of Ihon, Warren, and our Muslim brothers being held in Louisiana, freedom and peace for Palestine, freedom and peace for Palestine. Oh Allah, help us to use our knowledge, talents, and abilities to glorify you, to help those in need, and stand up for what is right. Free all living under oppression, abolish the borders, homes for the Afghan children coming to the Grand Rapids area. Ya Rab, strengthen us in our perseverance in the face of systemic violence. Free us from the corruption and destruction of capitalism and imperialism. Help those who are in Haiti. Freedom and health and safety for the people of Yemen. Freedom and peace for Julian Assange, who's been persecuted. Free all caught in the evil of human trafficking. May Allah bring ease for the hearts of the children that are separated from their families. May Allah's justice fall on the oppressors. Ameen. Reunite all the families that have been separated. Ameen. I think that's a good stopping point, inshallah. May Allah answer all of our du'as, accept our fast this Ramadan and our du'as in these last 10 nights. For those who don't know, the last 10 nights are really precious for Muslims within Ramadan, because this is a time where we try to increase in worship, and it's more likely for our prayers to be accepted. And it's a time that we try to really list out all that we can ask for and just pour our hearts out to God at the night, especially after we've broken our fast. So thank you for sharing space with us, everyone. I will switch right back to Catherine to close us out. And thank you for sharing space with me.
Thank you, Cynthia. We really want to appreciate all of you who've tuned in today. We invite you to continue supporting the work of all the participating organizations: Empower Change, Freedom to Thrive, the Arab American Association of New York, Partnership for the Advancement of New Americans, the American Muslim Advisory Council, NoMuslimBanEver, Project South, and the New York Immigration Coalition. I want to also extend special appreciations to all of our performances, all of our interpreters, our ASL and our Arabic interpreter, as well as all of the folks behind the scenes that handled all the tech. Take good care until we meet again. We wish you a continued blessed Ramadan. Salam.
Assalamualaikum, everyone. Ramadan Mubarak once again. Have a good iftar. Eat something nice.